Promises in the Rain. The first time Priya Mehra saw Vikram Singhania, she was sheltering from monsoon rain under the awning of Mumbai University's arts building. She clutched her portfolio of sketches to her chest, protecting them from the downpour that had appeared without warning, typical of June in Mumbai. "You look like you could use this," said a voice beside her. A tall young man with intelligent eyes and an easy smile offered her his umbrella. His kurta was splattered with paint and a camera hung around his neck. "I couldn't," Priya protested, though her sandaled feet were already soaked. "I insist," he said. "I'm Vikram, Fine Arts, 3rd year, specializing in architectural photography." Priya, 2nd year, classical dance and visual design. She accepted the umbrella with a shy smile. "Thank you." That chance meeting bloomed into study sessions at the campus cafe, where they'd share a single chai between them, their knees touching under the table as they critiqued each other's work. Vikram photographed buildings with an eye that found poetry in concrete and steel. Priya designed stage sets that breathed life into ancient stories. By the time winter arrived, they were inseparable. In Vikram's tiny apartment, lit by string lights and scented with incense, they dreamed aloud of their future. "We'll have a studio together," Vikram would say, tracing patterns on her palm. "Your dance space on one side, my photography on the other, and in between a little gallery for both our work. And we'll travel," Priya would add, "to all the places you've photographed from books. The Ghats of Varanasi, the temples of Khajuraho, the streets of Barcelona, the canals of Venice," he'd continue. "I'll photograph you dancing in every beautiful place in the world." Their love was the kind that made others smile. Professors, classmates, even the stern chaiwala, who saved their favorite corner table. Priya's conservative parents were initially hesitant about Vikram's artistic ambitions, but were won over by his respectful manner and clear devotion to their daughter. They had been together for nearly 2 years when the letter arrived. Vikram had been awarded the prestigious Kothari Scholarship, a fully funded opportunity to study architectural preservation at a renowned institute in London. "This is everything you've worked for," Priya said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands as she read the letter. They sat on the steps of the university amphitheater, where she often practiced her dance. "It's 3 years, Priya." Vikram's voice was torn between excitement and anguish. "I didn't think I'd actually get it. But you deserve it." She looked up at the sky, blinking rapidly. "Your portfolio is brilliant." The following weeks passed in a blur of planning and painful conversations. Long-distance relationships were difficult. The scholarship wouldn't cover visits home. Communication would be limited to expensive international calls and letters. "We'll make it work," Vikram promised the night before his departure. They stood on Marine Drive, watching waves crash against the seawall. "When I return, I'll have connections, opportunities. We'll build that life we talked about." "I know," Priya whispered, memorizing the feeling of his arms around her. But as weeks turned to months, the distance grew more than geographical. Vikram's calls became less frequent, his letters shorter. He spoke of new friends, influential mentors, opportunities to extend his stay. Priya tried to share her own news, a dance scholarship, her first exhibition, but sensed his mind was elsewhere. 6 months after his departure, the call came that changed everything. "I've been offered an apprenticeship with Hamid Architectural Group," Vikram said, his voice crackling over the international line. It's in Dubai, Priya, another 2 years after London." The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words. "I see," she finally said. "This could set us up for life," he continued. "I'd be working on projects all over the world." "What about our studio? Our gallery?" Her voice was barely audible. "We can still have that, just later." 3 weeks later, Priya sat alone in a clinic staring at a positive pregnancy test. While halfway across the world, Vikram embraced a future that no longer included her. The rhythm of 37 years flowed like the tides of the Arabian Sea, each wave washing away memories and bringing new joys in their place. Priya stood at the back of her dance studio in Pune, watching her students follow the intricate footwork of a Kathak sequence. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, creating patterns on the polished wooden floor not unlike the ones she once drew in her sketchbooks. "Excellent, Meena. Remember to keep your wrist flexible," Priya called out, moving between her students with practiced grace. At 32, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that commanded respect. Her hair was shorter now, practical for a working mother, but her eyes still held the same artistic passion they always had. The sound of drums from the adjacent room made her smile. Her son, Arjun, would be finishing his tabla lesson with Guruji. The boy had shown an extraordinary affinity for music from the time he could barely walk, tapping complex rhythms on whatever surface was available. Now at 6, nearly 7, his small fingers flew across the drumheads with a precision that astonished even veteran musicians. As her class ended and students gathered their things, Priya's assistant Jaya approached. "The registration for the cultural festival came today," she said, handing Priya an envelope. "They want Arjun to perform in the showcase for young talents." "Another one?" Priya's eyebrows rose as she took the envelope. "That's the third this month. People are talking about him, Priya. They say he has a gift." Priya nodded, a complex emotion crossing her face. Arjun's talent was undeniable, and unmistakably inherited from his father, who once composed melodies that made her dance as if the music flowed directly from her soul to her limbs. The door to the adjacent room opened, and a small boy with bright eyes and unruly curls bounded out, his face lighting up at the sight of his mother. "Mama, Guruji says I mastered the 16-beat cycle today," Arjun exclaimed, throwing his arms around her waist. "Did he now?" Priya knelt down, brushing a curl from his forehead. "Then I think this calls for a celebration. How about kulfi on our way home?" The evening routine was well established. Kulfi from their favorite street vendor, homework at their modest apartment's dining table, then dinner prepared together while Arjun chattered about his day. Their home was small but filled with color. Priya's paintings on the walls, potted plants on every windowsill, and various musical instruments that Arjun had accumulated scattered throughout. "Mama," Arjun said later that night as Priya tucked him into bed. "Drew from school says everyone has a father." Priya's hand stilled on the blanket. This wasn't the first time the question had arisen, but it seemed to be coming more frequently lately. "Everyone does have a father," she said carefully. "You have one too. But where is he?" "Drew's father comes to school events and takes him to cricket matches." Priya sat on the edge of the bed, choosing her words with care. "Your father lives very far away. He designs beautiful buildings in different countries. Does he know about me?" The question pierced her heart. "No, beta. When he left, I didn't know about you yet, and then it became difficult to reach him. Could we try to find him? I could show him my tabla playing." Priya stroked his hair. "Perhaps someday. For now, it's just you and me, and we're doing pretty well, aren't we?" But that night, after Arjun had fallen asleep, Priya found herself looking through an old wooden box she kept on the top shelf of her closet. Inside were letters from Vikram, the early ones full of love and promises, and newspaper clippings she'd collected over the years. Vikram Singhania, now a renowned architect whose innovative designs blended traditional Indian elements with contemporary structures, had made a name for himself internationally. The most recent article mentioned his return to India to oversee a major cultural center project in Mumbai. Life had not been easy as a single mother. Priya had moved from Mumbai to Pune after Arjun was born, starting fresh where questions were fewer. Her parents had been supportive, if disappointed, and helped her establish her dance school. She'd built a good life, carved out independence, and found joy in watching her son grow. Yet there were moments like when Arjun mastered a particularly complex rhythm, or when she caught glimpses of expressions so like Vikram's crossing their son's face, that the absence felt acute. Not for herself. She had long since made peace with Vikram's choice, but for Arjun, who had a right to know the other half of himself. The next morning brought news that would shatter their carefully balanced life. The Pune Arts Council was organizing a national youth music competition, and Arjun's tabla teacher had submitted his name without consulting Priya. The competition was prestigious, drawing young talents from across India, with renowned judges and extensive media coverage. "I didn't want you to say no," Guruji explained when confronted. "The boy has extraordinary talent, Priya. It would be wrong to hold him back." "Who are the judges?" Priya asked, a sense of foreboding rising within her. Guruji handed her the brochure, and there it was. Among the panel of distinguished musicians and composers was Vikram Singhania, listed as a visionary who bridges traditional Indian music with contemporary composition. That evening, as Arjun enthusiastically practiced for the competition, his small face serious with concentration. Priya watched him with a heart full of conflicting emotions. Soon, the rhythms her son created might lead him directly to the father who had never known he existed, and she wasn't sure if either of them was ready for what would follow. Notes of recognition. The auditorium of the Pune Cultural Center buzzed with anticipation. Parents adjusted their children's costumes, teachers gave last-minute instructions, and young performers paced nervously backstage. The National Youth Music Competition had drawn participants from Delhi to Chennai, transforming the usually serene cultural hub into a hive of activity. Priya knelt before Arjun, straightening the collar of his kurta, deep blue silk that made his eyes appear almost luminous. His hands fidgeted with the small silver amulet hanging from a black cord around his neck, a gift from his grandmother for protection and good fortune. "Remember what Guruji said," Priya murmured, tucking a wayward curl behind his ear.
"The tabla speaks through your heart, not just your hands. What if I make a mistake?"
Arjun whispered, suddenly looking younger than his 6 years. "Then you smile and continue." She cupped his face. "The greatest musicians aren't those who never make mistakes, but those who transform them into something beautiful." A volunteer coordinator approached them. "Arjun Mehra? You're in the junior instrumental category. Performer number 12. As the coordinator led Arjun toward the staging area, he looked back at his mother, a mixture of excitement and apprehension on his small face. Priya gave him an encouraging nod, then made her way to her seat in the audience. From her position in the middle rows, she had a clear view of both the stage and the judges' table. 5 distinguished individuals sat in a row, reviewing notes and speaking quietly among themselves. And there, at the far end, sat Vikram. 11 years had added definition to his features. His hair was shorter, styled with sophisticated precision, and he wore a tailored gray kurta over designer jeans, a blend of tradition and modernity that characterized his architectural work. Even from a distance, Priya could see the confidence in his posture, the easy authority of someone who had achieved recognition in his field. Her heart gave a painful twist. Once she had known every expression that crossed that face, every dream that filled that mind. Now he was a stranger who carried half of her son's genetic makeup. The competition progressed through the junior categories. A 9-year-old violinist played a moving Carnatic piece. Twin sisters performed a duet on the santoor. A serious boy, barely older than Arjun, impressed the audience with his sitar playing. Through it all, Vikram listened intently, making notes, occasionally leaning toward the other judges in discussion. Then the announcer called, "Performer number 12, Arjun Mehra, tabla." Priya's breath caught as Arjun walked onto the stage, looking impossibly small next to the tabla set arranged for him. He bowed respectfully to the audience and judges, then sat cross-legged before the drums, closed his eyes for a moment, and began to play. The transformation was immediate. The nervous boy vanished, replaced by an artist fully immersed in his craft. Arjun's small hands flew across the drumheads, creating intricate patterns that built upon one another like architectural structures. Foundations, pillars, arches, domes, a cathedral of sound. Halfway through the performance, Priya's gaze shifted to Vikram. He had stopped writing. His pen hovered forgotten over his notepad as he leaned forward, eyes fixed on Arjun with an expression of wonder. Then confusion flickered across his face, a slight furrowing of his brow, a tilt of his head, as though something about the boy struck a chord of recognition. When Arjun finished with a flourish of complex beats that belied his years, the audience erupted in applause. He broke into a wide smile, Vikram's smile, revealing the same dimple in his left cheek. As he stood to bow, the silver amulet swung forward, catching the stage lights. Vikram's eyes widened. He stared at the amulet, then at the boy's face, then back at the amulet again. Priya knew why. It was a family heirloom. One Vikram had given her on their anniversary, carved with a symbol that combined their initials in Sanskrit. When she discovered her pregnancy, she had added a small A to the design, making it a talisman for 3, not 2. Throughout the remaining performances, Vikram appeared distracted, his gaze repeatedly returning to the wings where the junior performers waited after their presentations. When the competition paused for intermission, Priya saw him rise quickly and make his way backstage. Her heart racing, she followed, navigating through the crowd with practiced grace. She found them in the junior performers' waiting area. Arjun, surrounded by congratulating teachers and peers, and Vikram, standing a few feet away, staring at the boy with an expression of dawning comprehension. "Your playing was extraordinary," Vikram said as the crowd around Arjun thinned. "Where did you learn such complex compositions?" "Guruji teaches me," Arjun replied, beaming at the praise from this important judge. "But sometimes I hear rhythms in my head and just play them." "I used to do the same thing," Vikram said softly. His eyes moved to the amulet. "That's a very special pendant you're wearing." "It's for protection," Arjun explained, holding it up proudly. "Mama says it carries our family's spirit. May I?" Vikram asked, extending his hand. Arjun nodded, and Vikram gently turned the silver piece over, revealing the engraved initials. His fingers trembled slightly. "Your mother," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Is she here today?" "Yes, she's—" Arjun began, turning to point. "I'm here," Priya said, stepping forward. Vikram looked up and the world seemed to pause between one heartbeat and the next. His eyes held 1,000 questions, a decade of absence, and the slow dawning realization of who stood before him. "Priya," he whispered. "Hello, Vikram." Her voice was steady, though her pulse was not. Arjun looked between them, confusion evident on his face. "Mama, do you know this judge?" Before either adult could answer, the backstage coordinator called for all junior performers to return for the awards announcement. Arjun hesitated, then hurried off after a reassuring nod from his mother. Left alone in their small pocket of space amidst the backstage bustle, Priya and Vikram stood in charged silence until he finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "He's mine, isn't he?" Priya met his gaze directly. "No," she said quietly. "He's ours. Though you never chose to be part of that ours." The announcer's voice echoed through the speakers, calling the judges back to their positions. Vikram's face was a canvas of emotions: shock, regret, wonder, pain. "We need to talk," he said urgently. "After the ceremony—" "Yes," Priya agreed, "may we do. But whatever happens, remember this. He has been loved completely every day of his life." As they parted ways, Vikram to the judge's table, Priya back to her seat, the weight of unspoken years hung between them. On stage, young musicians gathered in anticipation of results, unaware that among them, a small boy with extraordinary talent had just orchestrated the most significant reunion of his life. Dissonant harmonies. The silver trophy caught the late afternoon sunlight as Arjun clutched it to his chest. First place in the junior instrumental category, an achievement that had brought tears to Guruji's eyes and a standing ovation from the audience. But as they walked through the cultural center's gardens, Priya noticed her son's pensive expression. "You're quiet for someone who just won such an important competition," she said gently. "Are you feeling all right?" Arjun looked up at her, his eyes, so like Vikram's, serious beyond his years. "That judge knew our amulet, Mama, and you knew him." "Is he—" He trailed off, perhaps afraid to voice the question that hung in the air. Before Priya could formulate an answer, a figure approached from the direction of the auditorium. Vikram had changed from his formal judge's attire into a simple cotton shirt, looking more like the man she had once known. "Congratulations again," he said to Arjun, his voice warm but uncertain. "Your performance was truly remarkable." "Thank you, sir," Arjun replied formally, though his curious gaze moved between the two adults. Vikram glanced at Priya, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, her heart racing. "Arjun," Vikram said, kneeling to the boy's level, "I'd like to talk with you and your mother, perhaps over ice cream? There's a place near here that makes excellent quesar pista." "It's my favorite," Arjun said, surprised. "Mine too," Vikram replied softly. The ice cream parlor was mercifully quiet, tucked away on a side street with only a few patrons at outdoor tables. They sat in a corner booth, Arjun happily occupied with his elaborate sundae while the adults sipped chai and navigated the delicate beginning of a conversation 11 years overdue. "How do we do this?" Vikram asked in a low voice. Priya watched her son, measuring her words carefully. With honesty, but also with care. "He's only 6. Almost 7, Arjun interjected without looking up from his ice cream, making both adults realize he was listening more closely than they'd thought. Vikram's smile was tinged with sadness. "Almost 7, he agreed. "October 14th? Priya nodded, surprised he had calculated it so precisely. Arjun looked up then, his spoon paused halfway to his mouth. How did you know my birthday? Vikram took a deep breath. Because I knew your mother a long time ago before you were born. We were very close. Are you my father? The directness of the question, delivered with ice cream still on his upper lip, caught them both off guard. Vikram's eyes filled with tears. Yes, he said simply. Although I didn't know about you until today, which is something I deeply regret. Arjun considered this information with a seriousness that broke Priya's heart. Mama said you build buildings far away. I do. I design buildings that blend traditional elements with new ideas. Vikram hesitated, then added, much like your music combines classical patterns with your own innovations. This comparison seemed to please Arjun. Do you play the tabla too? Not as well as you, but I compose music, or I used to, before architecture took over my life. Your rhythm, the way you construct pattern, Vikram's voice grew thick. It's extraordinary to hear something of myself in your playing. For the next hour, the conversation flowed more easily as Arjun peppered Vikram with questions about his work, his travels, and whether he'd seen real elephants in Thailand. He had. Priya watched the interaction with complex emotions. There was pain, certainly. Wounds reopened by Vikram's sudden reappearance, but also a strange relief in witnessing Arjun discover this missing piece of himself. As evening approached, Arjun's energy began to wane, the excitement of the day catching up with him. Priya gathered their things, explaining they needed to catch the last bus back to their neighborhood. I can drive you, Vikram offered quickly. My car is in the parking structure. The drive to Priya's apartment was filled with Arjun's sleepy chatter from the back seat, while the front seats held a charged silence between the adults. When they arrived, Vikram insisted on carrying the drowsy competition winner up the 3 flights of stairs. Such a beautiful boy, Vikram murmured as he gently laid Arjun on his bed. His fingers hovered over the boy's curls, not quite touching, as if he didn't yet feel he had the right. Once Arjun was settled, they moved to Priya's small balcony, where potted tulsi and mint plants created a fragrant privacy screen from the neighboring apartments. The city lights spread below them, and for a moment they were silent, absorbing the enormity of the day's events. Why didn't you tell me? Vikram finally asked, his voice strained. Priya leaned against the railing, choosing her words carefully. I tried at first. I called your London number several times after I found out. Your roommate said you were traveling, then that you'd moved. The letters I sent were returned. I went to Barcelona for a project right after He couldn't finish the sentence. By the time I returned to London, I'd changed accommodations. If I had known, would it have changed anything? Priya interrupted, meeting his gaze directly. You had chosen your path, Vikram. Your career was taking off. Would you really have given that up to return to Mumbai for an unexpected pregnancy? His silence was answer enough. I'm not angry anymore, she continued more gently. I made my choice too. I chose to have Arjun, to build a life here, to be both mother and father to him. And it's been a good life. He's incredible, Vikram said, his voice filled with wonder and regret. So talented, so bright. I've missed everything, his first words, his first steps. Yes, you have, Priya acknowledged without cruelty. But he's still young. There's so much ahead of him. What happens now? Vikram asked, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Priya's heart ache. I'm here for the Cultural Center project. I'll be in Mumbai for at least a year, commuting to Pune regularly for site inspections. That's something we need to discuss carefully, Priya said. Arjun is the priority here. He's just met you. He needs time to process who you are, what this means. I want to be part of his life, Priya. I know I have no right to ask after all this time, but... You're his father, she interrupted softly. You have every right. But you need to understand, we come as a package. His life, our routines, his school, my dance academy, these things are established. If you want to be in his life, you need to fit into ours, not the other way around. Vikram nodded slowly. I understand. I can adjust my schedule, commute more often to Pune. Perhaps I could teach him music composition to complement his tabla training. Despite herself, Priya smiled. He'd like that. Over the following weeks, a careful dance began between the 3 of them. Vikram rearranged project meetings to coincide with Arjun's school schedule. He attended tabla recitals, started teaching Arjun the fundamentals of composition, and gradually became a presence in their lives, first as a visitor, then as a familiar figure. For Arjun, the transition was easier than either parent had anticipated. He absorbed the knowledge of Vikram's identity with a child's remarkable adaptability, proudly telling his friends that his father designed famous buildings and taught him secret music patterns no one else knew. For Priya, the adjustment was more complicated. Seeing Vikram with their son, watching their identical expressions of concentration as they worked on a composition together, hearing their overlapping laughter, brought both joy and renewed pain. The ease with which he slipped into fatherhood made his earlier absence all the more poignant. "He looks at you sometimes," Vikram said one evening as they sat on the balcony after Arjun had gone to bed. "When he's working through a difficult rhythm or trying to express something, he looks at you the same way I used to look at my mother, for reassurance, for that nod that says, 'You've got this.'" "He's always done that," Priya replied. "Even as a baby. Thank you," Vikram said suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. "For raising him with so much love, for teaching him to be confident, for giving him music." Priya was silent for a long moment. "I didn't do it for you. I know. That's why it means even more." As autumn progressed, their awkward trio began to find a rhythm. Still dissonant in places, but with moments of surprising harmony. Arjun became the bridge between them, his presence easing conversations that might otherwise have faltered under the weight of unresolved history. Yet for all the progress they made, Priya kept a careful distance. She welcomed Vikram into Arjun's life, but guarded her heart behind walls built from years of independence. When Vikram's glances lingered too long, when his hand accidentally brushed hers, she withdrew. Subtle but unmistakable. The past might be finding resolution through their son, but some wounds, Priya had decided, were better left unexamined. Or so she told herself. Even as long-buried feelings began to resurface with each shared family dinner, each time Vikram's familiar laugh filled her small apartment, what neither of them could have anticipated was how thoroughly their son would orchestrate their reluctant hearts' reunion, or that music would once again become the language through which their complicated emotions could finally find expression. Symphony of second chances, the auditorium of Arjun's school buzzed with pre-concert energy. Parents claimed seats, teachers herded excited children backstage, and volunteers arranged last-minute decorations for the winter music showcase. In the 3 months since the competition that had changed their lives, the seasons had shifted from monsoon to the mild Pune winter, bringing with them a gradual transformation in the rhythm of their days. Backstage, Priya adjusted the blue silk scarf around Arjun's neck, while Vikram tuned a sitar nearby. For tonight's performance, they had prepared something special. Arjun would play the tabla, accompanied by Vikram on sitar, performing an original composition they had created together during their weekend music sessions. "Are you nervous?" Priya asked, noticing Arjun's fingers tapping an anxious beat against his thigh. "A little," he admitted. "It's different than playing alone." "That's the beauty of it," Vikram said, setting down the sitar and joining them. "When we play together, we support each other. If one of us hesitates, the other carries the melody forward." Arjun nodded, his expression serious, like a family. The simple observation hung in the air between the adults, laden with meaning. Over the past months, they had indeed begun to function as a kind of family. Not conventional, perhaps, but genuine in its connections. Vikram had rented an apartment near Priya's, allowing him to be present for school events and weekend activities while still managing his project in Mumbai. He had integrated himself into Arjun's life with patience and dedication, never pushing but always present. With Priya, however, things remained more complicated. The walls she had built to protect herself after his departure remained largely intact, though hairline cracks had begun to appear. Sometimes, when they shared a meal after Arjun's bedtime or discussed their son's progress, glimpses of their former ease would surface, only to retreat again behind careful politeness. 5 minutes until curtain, the music teacher announced, breaking into Priya's thoughts. "Performers to your positions, please." "I'll go find my seat," Priya said, squeezing Arjun's shoulder encouragingly. As she turned to leave, Vikram touched her arm lightly. "Priya, wait. There's something—" He glanced at Arjun, who was being called over by his teacher. "We made a small change to the composition. I hope you don't mind." Before she could ask what he meant, Arjun was waving frantically for Vikram to join him, and Priya had no choice but to make her way to her seat in the audience. The showcase began with the younger classes performing simple pieces on recorders and small hand drums. As the evening progressed, the performances grew more sophisticated. A string quartet of older students, a vocal ensemble, a promising young flautist. Throughout, Priya found herself watching the clock, anticipation building for the final performance of the night. Finally, the music teacher stepped forward. For our closing piece, we have something very special. 7-year-old Arjun Mehra, who recently won the National Youth Music Competition, will perform an original composition with his father, architectural designer and composer, Vikram Singhania. The piece is called Reunion. A murmur went through the audience as Vikram and Arjun took the stage. They settled themselves on the low platform arranged with their instruments, exchanged a glance, and began to play. The composition opened with Vikram's sitar, a simple, questioning melody that seemed to search for something just beyond reach. Arjun's tabla entered cautiously, establishing a rhythm that complemented the sitar while maintaining its independence. The two instruments circled each other, sometimes converging, sometimes diverging, creating a musical conversation of approach and withdrawal. As the piece progressed, the tempo increased, the patterns becoming more complex yet more harmonious. There was a sense of growing understanding between the instruments, of separate melodies finding ways to weave together without losing their distinct voices. Then came the surprise, the change Vikram had mentioned. As the composition neared its climax, a third instrument joined unexpectedly. A female vocalist stepped from the wings, her voice rising in a wordless melody that bridged the sitar and tabla, creating a perfect harmony among all three elements. Priya recognized the singer as Navya, the music teacher's daughter and a rising classical vocalist. But more shocking than her appearance was the melody she sang. It was a variation on a song Vikram had composed for Priya years ago, when they were students and the world was full of promise. Tears filled Priya's eyes as the three elements of the composition, tabla, sitar, and voice came together in a final, triumphant resolution. The audience erupted in applause as the piece concluded, but Priya barely heard them. She was transfixed by the tableau on stage, her son beaming with pride, Vikram gazing out into the audience directly at her, and between them, a musical bridge that had just connected past to present. After the performance, the school courtyard filled with families congratulating the young musicians. Arjun was surrounded by classmates and teachers, basking in their praise while Vikram stood nearby, fielding questions about the composition from impressed parents. Priya found herself beside the refreshment table, trying to process the emotions stirred by the performance. She was so deep in thought that she didn't notice Vikram approach until he spoke. "You recognized it, didn't you?" he asked quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice just yet. "I've never stopped composing it," he continued. "That melody I wrote for you all those years ago, I've carried it with me, adding to it, changing it as life changed me. But it was always incomplete." He paused, watching Arjun across the courtyard. "Now I understand why." "Vikram," she began, but he gently interrupted. "Please let me say this. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, much less a second chance. What I did, choosing ambition over us, it's not something I can undo. But finding Arjun, finding you again." He took a deep breath. "These past months have taught me what truly matters. Not the buildings I've designed or the awards on my shelf, but this, being present for the people I love." "Love is a complicated word between us," Priya said carefully. "I know. But it's the right word. I never stopped loving you, Priya, even when I was too blind to see what I was walking away from. And now, seeing the life you've built, the magnificent way you've raised our son, I love you even more deeply but differently. With respect, with admiration, with profound gratitude." A small figure crashed into them before Priya could respond. "Did you like it, Mama?" Arjun asked breathlessly. "The surprise part? It was Baba's idea." Baba, the word hung in the air. It was the first time Arjun had called Vikram anything other than his name. A shift that clearly moved Vikram, whose eyes glistened in the courtyard lights. "It was beautiful," Priya managed, pulling Arjun close. "All of it." Later that night, after Arjun had fallen asleep still clutching his tabla sticks, Priya and Vikram sat on her balcony as had become their custom, The city lights twinkled below and the scent of jasmine drifted from a neighbor's garden. What happens now? Priya asked softly, echoing the question Vikram had posed months ago on this same balcony. That depends, he replied. I've been offered a permanent position with the Cultural Center, to oversee not just its construction but its arts programming afterward. I'd be based in Pune, not Mumbai. You'd stay? What about your international projects, your firm in Dubai? I've realized something about architecture, Vikram said thoughtfully. We design spaces for people to live their lives, to create memories, to build connections. But I've spent so long creating these spaces for others that I forgot to build them for myself. He turned to face her. I want to be here, Priya. Not just for Arjun, though he's reason enough, but for the chance to build something meaningful with both of you, if you'll allow it. Priya was silent for a long moment, considering all that had transpired since that rainy competition day. She thought of Arjun's face lighting up when Vikram arrived for their weekend sessions, of the careful way Vikram had integrated himself into their lives without presumption, of the music they had created together tonight, a perfect metaphor for what they might become. I can't promise anything, she said finally. There's still so much between us, years we can't reclaim, pain that doesn't simply vanish. I'm not asking for promises, Vikram replied gently. Just possibility. A chance to see if what we once had might evolve into something new, something stronger because of what we've learned apart. Priya looked through the window to where Arjun slept peacefully, the silver amulet rising and falling with his breath. Possibility, she repeated, the word feeling right on her tongue. I think we can begin with that. The following spring brought changes to their lives that echoed the season's renewal. Vikram's position at the Cultural Center was confirmed, and he found a house not far from Priya's apartment, close enough for Arjun to move easily between both homes, yet respectful of the boundaries Priya still needed. Priya's dance academy flourished, expanding to include a music program where Arjun assisted with the youngest tabla students, showing remarkable patience for a child his age, and on weekends, the three of them often worked together on new compositions that blended dance and music, Priya's choreography responding to the melodies Vikram and Arjun created. Their relationship evolved with deliberate slowness. Coffee after dropping Arjun at school became occasional lunches. Shared family dinners sometimes extended to just the two of them, talking late into the evening. The first time Vikram reached for her hand during one of these conversations, Priya allowed her fingers to intertwine with his, a small gesture that represented enormous progress. 1 year to the day after the competition that had reunited them, they returned to the same auditorium for the next edition of the National Youth Music Competition. This time Arjun performed a piece that required 3 musicians, himself on tabla, Vikram on sitar, and Priya providing rhythmic dance elements that complemented the percussion. As they took their bows to enthusiastic applause, Arjun between them with one hand held by each parent, Priya caught Vikram's gaze over their son's head. What passed between them wasn't the passionate intensity of their youth, but something deeper, a recognition of the journey they had taken, apart and together, and the symphony they were still composing, note by careful note. Later that evening, as they walked through the Cultural Center gardens, now fully realized according to Vikram's designs, with performance spaces nestled among flowering trees, Arjun ran ahead to examine a small amphitheater built specifically for young musicians. He's going to be something extraordinary, Vikram observed, watching their son with pride. He already is, Priya replied. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she added, we all are. Vikram looked at her questioningly and she continued, this, what we've become. It's not what I imagined for my life, but it's beautiful in its own way, like one of your buildings that incorporates an unexpected element and becomes stronger for it. The best designs often come from working with challenges, not despite them, Vikram agreed, tentatively slipping his arm around her waist. This time Priya didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly into him, allowing herself to acknowledge what had been growing between them over the past year. Not a return to what was lost, but the careful construction of something new, built on stronger foundations. Ahead of them, Arjun had climbed onto the small stage and was testing its acoustics by singing a note that rang clear in the evening air. The sound drew his parents forward, united in their love for him and the tentative hope for what they might yet become. a family whose individual melodies had found their way, through time and forgiveness, into perfect harmony.